Everyone knows the story. A tattered map, weathered by salt, spray and time, unfolded on a tavern table by candlelight. An ancient piece of parchment marked with mysterious symbols, cryptic notations, and somewhere in the center, that iconic X marking the spot where untold riches lie buried beneath tropical sands. But what if I told you that real pirate maps were far stranger, far more sophisticated, and filled with secret codes that most people couldn't read, even if they held the map in their hands? The image of the pirate treasure map has become so embedded in American culture that we rarely question its origins or its authenticity. From Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island to Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, from children's birthday party games to elaborate escape rooms, the concept of the treasure map, with its mysterious markings, has captured our collective imagination for over a century. We see these maps as romantic relics of a bygone age of adventure, symbols of dreams that could come true if only we could crack their ancient codes. But the reality of pirate cartography was far more complex and infinitely more dangerous than popular culture suggests. Real pirate maps weren't simple treasure hunting guides designed for weekend adventurers. They were sophisticated documents created by desperate criminals, who understood that information was often more valuable than gold itself, and that the wrong person reading the wrong map could mean the difference between wealth and death, between freedom and the gallows. Were these legendary maps real? Did pirates actually create coded documents that could lead to buried fortunes? And if so, how did these maritime outlaws hide their most precious secrets in ink and symbols, creating puzzles that have confounded treasure hunters for centuries? The answers to these questions reveal a hidden world of pirate intelligence, criminal innovation, and code-breaking that makes modern spy thrillers seem tame by comparison. To understand the truth about pirate treasure maps, we must first confront one of the most persistent myths in popular culture: the idea that pirates routinely buried their treasure. This romantic notion, while deeply appealing to our sense of adventure and mystery, has little basis in historical reality. The vast majority of pirates never buried a single coin of their plunder, and for very practical reasons that reveal much about the nature of pirate life itself. Pirates were, above all, practical people living in an incredibly dangerous and uncertain world. They faced constant threats from naval forces, rival pirate crews, mutinous subordinates, and the ever-present possibility of disease, storms, and violent death. In such circumstances, burying treasure made little practical sense. What good was hidden gold if you died before you could return to claim it? How could you trust that your burial site would remain undisturbed, or that you would even be able to find it again after months or years at sea? More importantly, pirates needed their money immediately and constantly. They had to pay their crews, purchase supplies, maintain and repair their ships, and bribe officials who might otherwise turn them in to authorities. Pirate crews operated on a share system where everyone expected their portion of any prize as soon as possible after a successful raid. Telling a crew that their hard-earned loot was buried somewhere for safekeeping was a sure way to provoke mutiny. The few documented cases of pirates actually burying treasure involved extraordinary circumstances that proved the rule rather than contradicted it. The most famous example is Captain William Kidd, whose case became legendary precisely because it was so unusual. Kidd was originally a privateer, legally authorized by the British government to attack enemy ships. When his mission went wrong and he was accused of piracy, he found himself in the desperate position of needing to hide evidence of his activities, while also trying to negotiate his way back into official favor. Kidd buried treasure on Gardiner's Island, near Long Island, New York. not because this was standard pirate practice, but because he was trying to use it as a bargaining chip with colonial authorities. He hoped that revealing the location of his buried wealth might convince officials to treat him as a wayward privateer rather than a common pirate. The strategy failed spectacularly. Kidd was executed in London in 1701. But his treasure was recovered, and his case became the foundation for centuries of treasure hunting mythology. However, the rarity of actual, buried pirate treasure doesn't mean that pirates didn't create maps and coded documents. They absolutely did, but these documents served very different purposes than the treasure maps of popular imagination. Real pirate maps were primarily navigational aids, strategic intelligence documents, and coded communications systems used to coordinate activities among dispersed criminal networks. Pirates operated in a world where accurate information was literally a matter of life and death. Knowing the location of safe harbors, the movements of naval patrols, the schedules of merchant vessels, and the political situations in various ports could mean the difference between successful raids and catastrophic defeats. This information was far too valuable and sensitive to be recorded in plain language that could be read by anyone who happened to acquire the document. The maps that pirates did create were therefore hybrid documents that combined legitimate navigational information with coded intelligence, encrypted communications, and deliberately misleading elements designed to confuse unauthorized readers. These weren't treasure maps in the Hollywood sense, but they were infinitely more sophisticated and dangerous than anything popular culture has ever depicted. Understanding these real pirate codes requires us to think like the criminals who created them. Pirates lived in a world where trust was scarce, betrayal was common, and information could be weaponized by enemies, rivals, or even former allies. Any document that contained sensitive information had to be protected not just from casual observers, but from people who might have extensive knowledge of pirate operations, maritime navigation, and even the specific individuals involved in creating the codes. The result was a complex system of maritime cryptography that drew on traditions from naval intelligence, merchant marine practices, indigenous knowledge systems, and the improvisational creativity of people whose lives depended on staying one step ahead of both the law and their competitors. These coding systems were never standardized or formally documented, which makes them both fascinating to study and incredibly difficult to crack centuries after their creation. The most famous symbol in treasure map mythology is undoubtedly the X marks the spot designation that has become synonymous with buried pirate treasure. This simple symbol has appeared in countless books, movies, and games, representing the ultimate goal of every treasure hunter's quest. But like so much treasure map mythology, the reality of how pirates actually used symbols and markings was far more complex and varied than popular culture suggests. Historical analysis of authentic pirate documents suggests that the X marking was actually quite rare in real pirate cartography. When it did appear, it often served very different functions than simply marking the location of buried treasure. Pirates were more likely to use X markings to indicate dangerous areas to be avoided. Hidden reefs, hostile settlements, areas where naval patrols were particularly active, or locations where previous pirate expeditions had met with disaster. The association between X marks and treasure locations appears to have been largely a creation of 19th and 20th century popular fiction, particularly Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island and the countless imitators that followed. Stevenson's use of the X was a brilliant piece of storytelling that created a simple, visually striking symbol that readers could immediately understand and remember. But it was fiction, not historical documentation. When pirates did need to mark specific locations on their maps, they were far more likely to use symbols that had personal meaning to the creator of the map, or that connected to existing navigational or cultural traditions that would be understood by their intended audience. These symbols were often drawn from religious iconography, astronomical observations, natural landmarks, or coded systems that had been agreed upon in advance by the people who would need to read the map. Religious symbols were particularly common in pirate maps, reflecting both the genuine spiritual beliefs that many pirates maintained despite their criminal activities and the practical advantages of using symbols that were already familiar to most literate people of the era. Crosses might mark important locations, but they could represent Christian burial grounds, churches that offered sanctuary, or simply areas where the mapmaker had experienced significant events. The specific type and style of cross used could carry additional coded information. A simple Latin cross might indicate a safe location, while a cross with additional decorative elements might warn of danger. Orthodox crosses, with their distinctive three-bar design, might indicate areas with Eastern European or Russian connections. Celtic crosses could suggest Irish or Scottish pirate connections. The possibilities for coded meaning were endless, limited only by the creativity and knowledge of the mapmaker. Solar and lunar symbols were also frequently used in pirate cartography, serving multiple functions simultaneously. On one level, these symbols provided practical navigational information, helping readers orient themselves relative to celestial bodies that could be used for navigation. But they also carried temporal information, indicating the best times to approach certain locations or avoid specific dangers. A sun symbol might indicate a location that was safest to approach during daylight hours, when visibility was good and the risks of running aground on hidden obstacles were minimized. Conversely, a moon symbol might mark areas that were better approached under cover of darkness, when pirate activities were less likely to be observed by authorities or rival crews. The phases of the moon carried additional coded significance. A full moon symbol might indicate a location that required bright moonlight for safe navigation, while a new moon symbol could mark areas where complete darkness was necessary for concealment. Crescent moons might indicate tidal information, marking locations where specific tidal conditions were necessary for safe harbor or successful raids. Star symbols served similar functions, often indicating locations that could only be navigated using specific stellar references. Pirates who operated in the same areas for extended periods developed intimate knowledge of local star patterns, and could create coded references that would be meaningless to outsiders, but perfectly clear to crew members who shared that knowledge. However, the most sophisticated symbol systems used by pirates involved completely original iconography that was meaningless to anyone outside the specific group that created it. These symbols might be abstract geometric shapes, stylized representations of animals or objects, or combinations of existing symbols that created entirely new meanings through their arrangement and context. Creating and maintaining these original symbol systems required a level of coordination and trust that was rare in pirate communities. The symbols had to be memorable enough that crew members could learn and use them reliably, but obscure enough that they would be meaningless to anyone who didn't have access to the decoding key. They had to be simple enough to draw accurately under difficult conditions at sea, but sophisticated enough to carry the complex information that pirate operations required. The success of these symbol systems depended on the ability of pirate crews to maintain operational security over extended periods. Everyone who knew the meaning of the symbols had to be trusted not to reveal them to authorities. Rivals, or anyone else who might use the information against the crew. This requirement created additional layers of loyalty and mutual dependence within pirate communities, binding crews together through shared knowledge that could be fatal if compromised. Natural landmarks provided some of the most reliable and sophisticated coding systems available to pirates, who operated in an era when human-made structures were rare and often temporary. But when natural features provided permanent reference points that could be counted on to remain stable across decades or even centuries, pirates developed an almost supernatural ability to read landscapes and seascapes, identifying and cataloging natural features that could serve as navigational aids and coded reference points. This knowledge was often acquired through extended periods of operation in specific geographic areas, allowing pirate crews to develop intimate familiarity with local conditions that would be impossible for outsiders to replicate quickly. Distinctive trees were among the most commonly used natural landmarks in pirate mapping systems. Large, ancient trees with unusual shapes or characteristics could serve as reliable reference points that would be immediately recognizable to anyone who had been given the proper description. Pirates often looked for trees that had been shaped by prevailing winds, struck by lightning, or marked by other natural phenomena that created unique visual signatures. The coding systems built around tree landmarks were often remarkably sophisticated. The type of tree could carry meaning. Palm trees might indicate tropical operations. Pine trees could suggest northern waters, and oak trees might mark locations in temperate coastal regions. The condition of the tree provided additional information. Healthy trees might indicate safe areas, while dead or damaged trees could warn of dangers or mark locations where previous operations had gone wrong. Even more sophisticated were the systems that used relationships between multiple trees to encode information. Two trees growing close together might indicate one type of location, while three trees in a triangle pattern could mean something completely different. The relative sizes of the trees, their species, and their spatial relationship to other landmarks could all carry coded significance that would be completely invisible to casual observers. Rock formations provided even more permanent landmarks that pirates could use for long-term navigational and operational planning. Distinctive stone outcroppings, unusual boulder arrangements, and characteristic cliff formations were carefully catalogued and mapped by experienced pirate crews, who understood that these features were likely to remain unchanged for generations. The coding potential of rock formations was enormous. The shape of rocks could carry meaning. Round boulders might indicate one type of information, while angular formations suggested something else entirely. The color of stones could provide additional coded data, with different mineral compositions creating visual signatures that experienced observers could read like a complex language. The arrangement of multiple rock formations created opportunities for even more sophisticated coding systems. Pirates might use the angles between different rock outcroppings to encode numerical information, with specific geometric relationships corresponding to distances, directions, or quantities of supplies hidden in the area. The relative heights of different formations could carry temporal information, indicating the best times to approach certain locations or avoid specific dangers. Coastal features provided some of the most reliable and detailed information available to pirate cartographers. The shape of bays and inlets, the configuration of beaches and headlands, the location of hidden coves and protected harbors, all of these features were carefully studied and catalogued by pirates, who understood that their survival often depended on their ability to find safe refuge quickly when pursued by more powerful enemies. The coding systems built around coastal features were necessarily complex, because these landmarks had to serve multiple functions simultaneously. They provided navigational information that helped pirates find their way in unfamiliar waters, tactical intelligence that identified safe harbor and dangerous areas, and operational data that indicated the availability of supplies, fresh water, and other necessities. Pirates developed specialized vocabularies for describing coastal features that were often incomprehensible to outsiders, but perfectly clear to experienced crew members. A broken beach might refer to a shoreline with rocky outcroppings that provided natural fortification but made landing difficult. A sleeping harbor could indicate a protected anchorage that was invisible from the open ocean. A crying cliff might mark a location where fresh water was available from natural springs. The seasonal behavior of coastal features added additional layers of complexity to these coding systems. Pirates who operated in the same areas over extended periods learned to read the changing patterns of erosion, sedimentation, and vegetation that could alter the appearance and accessibility of coastal landmarks from season to season or year to year. Understanding these natural coding systems required pirates to develop skills that went far beyond simple seamanship. They had to become amateur geologists, botanists, meteorologists, and ethnographers, learning to read the landscape with the same precision that they read ocean currents and wind patterns. This expertise was one of the factors that made experienced pirate crews so formidable. They possessed local knowledge that was simply impossible for outsiders to acquire quickly, giving them significant advantages over both their prey and their pursuers. The most sophisticated pirate maps employed mathematical and linguistic coding systems that transformed apparently straightforward navigational information into complex puzzles that could only be solved by readers who possessed the proper decoding keys. These systems drew on traditions from military cryptography, commercial cipher techniques, and scholarly encryption methods that were being developed in European universities and royal courts during the golden age of piracy. Numerical codes were among the most common mathematical systems used by pirates, partly because basic arithmetic skills were more widespread among criminal communities than advanced literacy, and partly because numbers could be disguised more easily than text within apparently legitimate navigational documents. Pirates developed various methods for encoding distances, coordinates, and quantities using numerical systems that would appear to be standard navigational data to casual observers. Simple substitution codes were the most basic numerical encryption method used in pirate cartography. Each letter of the alphabet might be assigned a corresponding number, allowing pirates to encode written information as strings of digits that could be incorporated into mathematical calculations, coordinate systems, or measurement notations. These codes were relatively easy to use and remember, but they were also vulnerable to frequency analysis and other code-breaking techniques that were beginning to be understood by intelligence services of the era. More sophisticated numerical codes used mathematical operations to disguise encoded information. Pirates might use addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division to transform real coordinates, distances, or quantities into false numbers that would mislead unauthorized readers, while still providing accurate information to those who knew the mathematical key. These systems required higher levels of mathematical sophistication than simple substitution codes, but they offered significantly better security against code-breaking efforts. Some pirate crews developed mathematical codes based on geometric relationships that could be incorporated directly into map design. The angles between different marked locations might encode numerical information, with specific angular relationships corresponding to distances, directions, or other coded data. The proportional relationships between different elements of a map, the relative sizes of islands, the ratios between different distance measurements, the geometric patterns formed by multiple landmarks, could all carry encoded meaning that would be invisible to readers who didn't understand the underlying mathematical system. Coordinate systems provided particularly rich opportunities for mathematical encoding. Pirates might use false coordinate systems that required mathematical transformation to yield accurate positional information. Real latitude and longitude coordinates might be disguised using addition or subtraction of specific values that were known only to authorized readers. Multiple coordinate systems might be layered on the same map, with different systems corresponding to different types of information or different levels of access to coded intelligence. Linguistic coding systems were even more sophisticated, drawing on the multilingual environment in which most pirate crews operated. Pirates typically spoke multiple languages and dialects, coming from diverse national and ethnic backgrounds, that created natural opportunities for linguistic encryption. Information could be encoded using unfamiliar languages, specialized dialects, or constructed vocabulary systems that would be meaningless to most observers. Latin remained the scholarly language of educated Europeans throughout the pirate era, and many pirate maps incorporated Latin words and phrases that served dual purposes as both classical decoration and coded information. Pirates with educational backgrounds, and there were more of these than popular culture suggests, could use Latin terminology to encode locations, distances, directions, and other operational intelligence in ways that would be completely opaque to illiterate observers but perfectly clear to readers with classical educations. Indigenous languages provided even better security for pirates operating in colonial territories, where European authorities had limited familiarity with local linguistic traditions. Pirates who had spent time in Caribbean, Pacific, or Indian Ocean territories often learned enough of local languages to use them for basic encoding purposes. Place names, directional terms, and quantity indicators borrowed from indigenous languages could be incorporated into maps in ways that would be impossible for European authorities to decode without extensive local knowledge. Some pirate crews developed entirely artificial languages or specialized jargon systems that were known only to members of specific organizations. These constructed vocabularies might borrow elements from multiple natural languages, combine existing words in novel ways, or create completely original terminology that had meaning only within the particular criminal community that developed it. Maintaining these artificial language systems required constant use and reinforcement within pirate crews, creating additional bonds of shared knowledge and mutual dependence. The most sophisticated linguistic codes involved multiple layers of meaning embedded within apparently straightforward text. A document might appear to be a simple navigational log or trading record, but contain encoded information that could be extracted using specific reading techniques known only to authorized users. Individual words might carry coded meanings that were different from their apparent definitions. The arrangement of sentences, the choice of specific synonyms, or the inclusion of particular grammatical constructions might all carry coded significance that transformed innocent-looking documents into complex intelligence reports. Punctuation and formatting provided additional opportunities for linguistic encoding. The placement of periods, commas, and other marks might indicate coded information. The capitalization of specific letters could spell out hidden messages. The spacing between words or lines might encode numerical data. These formatting codes were particularly effective because they were virtually invisible to casual readers, who would focus on the apparent content of text rather than its detailed presentation. Creating and maintaining these mathematical and linguistic coding systems required levels of education, coordination, and discipline that challenge popular stereotypes about pirate communities. These were not simple criminal gangs operating on pure instinct and violence, but sophisticated organizations that developed and implemented complex information security systems under extremely challenging conditions. The success of these coding systems depended on the ability of pirate crews to maintain educational standards and training protocols that ensured new members could learn and use the codes effectively while preventing security breaches that could compromise ongoing operations. This requirement created incentives for pirates to recruit educated individuals, invest in training and skill development, and maintain organizational cultures that valued intellectual sophistication alongside physical courage and maritime expertise. Religious and astronomical symbols in pirate cartography represented some of the most sophisticated and layered coding systems available to maritime criminals, drawing on shared cultural knowledge that was widespread enough to be understood by crew members from diverse backgrounds, but flexible enough to carry complex, encoded meanings that would be opaque to unauthorized observers. The use of religious symbolism in pirate maps reflected the complex relationships that many pirates maintained with spiritual traditions throughout their criminal careers. Contrary to popular stereotypes that portray pirates as completely godless outlaws, historical evidence suggests that many pirates retained significant connections to religious beliefs and practices, even as their actions violated most moral codes associated with those traditions. Christian symbolism was ubiquitous in pirate cartography, partly because Christianity was the dominant religious tradition among European pirates, but also because Christian symbols offered rich possibilities for encoded communication. The cross, as we've discussed, could carry multiple layers of meaning depending on its style, orientation, and context within a larger symbolic system. But Christian iconography extended far beyond simple crosses to include complex systems of saints, biblical references, and theological concepts that could be used for sophisticated information encoding. Saints' symbols provided particularly useful coding opportunities because they combined widespread cultural recognition with specific attributes and associations that could carry detailed encoded information. Saint Christopher, the patron saint of travelers, might mark locations that were safe for transient visitors. Saint Nicholas, associated with sailors and merchants, could indicate areas where commercial opportunities were available. Saint Barbara, the patron saint of artillery and explosions, might warn of locations where military resistance was likely. The specific attributes associated with different saints created opportunities for even more detailed encoding. Saints depicted with keys might indicate locations where access was restricted or controlled. Saints shown with books could mark areas where written intelligence was available. Saints associated with specific animals might encode information about local wildlife, food sources, or natural dangers. Biblical references provided another layer of Christian symbolism that could be used for coded communication. References to specific books, chapters, or verses could encode numerical information using systems that would be familiar to anyone with basic biblical literacy. The names of biblical locations could serve as coded references to real geographic areas. Stories and parables could provide frameworks for understanding complex operational instructions or tactical intelligence. The seasonal calendar of Christian observances created opportunities for temporal stating that could be layered onto geographic information. References to specific saints' days, liturgical seasons, or religious festivals could indicate optimal timing for operations. Warn of periods when authorities might be particularly vigilant, or provide scheduling information for coordinated activities among multiple pirate crews. Non-Christian religious traditions provided even more secure coding opportunities for pirates operating in regions where European authorities had limited familiarity with local spiritual practices. Islamic symbols and terminology could be used effectively in areas where pirates had contact with Muslim populations. Hindu and Buddhist iconography provided coding possibilities in regions where these traditions were prevalent. Indigenous religious symbols offered excellent security in colonial territories where European authorities had minimal understanding of native spiritual practices. The syncretic religious practices that developed in many colonial regions created particularly rich opportunities for religious coding. Pirates operating in the Caribbean, for example, could draw on the complex symbolic systems that emerged from the interaction of African, European, and indigenous religious traditions. These hybrid spiritual practices created symbolic vocabularies that were familiar to local populations, but often completely incomprehensible to European authorities. Astronomical symbols provided coding opportunities that combined practical navigational utility with sophisticated information encryption. Pirates needed accurate astronomical knowledge for navigation, which meant that astronomical symbols and calculations could be incorporated into maps without arousing suspicion from observers who might encounter the documents. The movements of celestial bodies provided natural coding opportunities that changed constantly, but followed predictable patterns that could be calculated and anticipated by people with appropriate astronomical knowledge. The positions of stars, planets, and constellations could encode temporal information, indicating optimal timing for operations or providing scheduling data for coordinated activities. Lunar cycles were particularly useful for pirate coding because they affected both navigation and tactical operations. The phases of the moon influenced tidal patterns, visibility conditions, and the psychological states of both pirates and their targets. References to specific lunar phases could encode complex operational instructions that combined timing, tactical, and psychological elements into compact symbolic systems. Solar observations provided additional coding possibilities, particularly for pirates operating in tropical regions where seasonal variations in solar positions were less pronounced than in temperate latitudes. The positions of the sun at different times of day could be used to encode directional information, timing data, or references to specific operational procedures that were associated with particular times of day. Planetary movements offered the most sophisticated astronomical coding opportunities, but they also required the highest levels of astronomical knowledge to create and interpret effectively. The positions of visible planets relative to stars, constellations, and each other could encode extremely complex information using systems that would be completely incomprehensible to observers without advanced astronomical training. Astrological traditions provided additional layers of meaning that could be layered onto astronomical observations, while modern readers might dismiss astrology as superstition. It represented a sophisticated symbolic system that was taken seriously by many educated people during the pirate era. Astrological symbols and concepts could be used to encode information about personality types, tactical preferences, optimal timing for different types of operations, and assessments of risk and opportunity that would be meaningful to readers who understood astrological principles. The combination of religious and astronomical symbolism created opportunities for extremely sophisticated, multi-layered coding systems that could carry enormous amounts of information within compact visual presentations. A single symbol that combined religious and astronomical elements might simultaneously encode geographic, temporal, tactical, and spiritual information that would require pages of text to communicate using conventional written language. Creating and interpreting these complex symbolic systems required extensive cultural knowledge, mathematical sophistication, and spiritual understanding that challenged crew members to maintain high levels of intellectual engagement with their criminal activities. Pirates who could master these symbolic languages gained significant advantages in terms of operational security, tactical coordination, and strategic planning that made their criminal enterprises far more effective than simple robbery and violence could achieve alone. One of the most ingenious aspects of pirate cartography was the deliberate creation of false maps designed to mislead, confuse, and sometimes destroy anyone unfortunate enough to believe their contents. These decoy documents represented a sophisticated form of information warfare that protected pirates' real operations while actively working to eliminate threats from competitors, authorities, and treasure hunters. The psychology behind decoy maps was complex and revealing of the paranoid, competitive environment in which pirates operated. Pirates understood that their maps and coded documents were valuable intelligence assets that could be stolen, sold, or used against them by enemies, rather than simply trying to hide their real information. Many pirates chose to flood the intelligence environment with false data that would overwhelm and confuse anyone trying to use captured documents against them. Creating effective decoy maps required almost as much skill and knowledge as creating real ones. The false documents had to be convincing enough to fool experienced sailors and navigators, which meant they needed to incorporate accurate-seeming navigational data, plausible geographic features, and believable operational intelligence. At the same time, they had to contain enough errors or dangers to neutralize anyone who tried to use them for actual operations. Some decoy maps were designed to send treasure hunters and rival pirates to locations that were simply empty, wasting their time and resources on pointless expeditions that would leave them no closer to finding real pirate assets. These maps might indicate elaborate burial sites, complete with detailed landmarks, precise measurements, and convincing backstories, but lead only to empty holes in the ground. More malicious decoy maps directed their users toward active dangers that could eliminate threats to pirate operations permanently. These documents might indicate safe harbors that were actually controlled by hostile forces, suggest supply sources that were known to be contaminated or poisoned, or recommend routes through waters that were infested with naval patrols or rival pirate crews. The most sophisticated and deadly decoy maps incorporated elements that were designed to destroy anyone who tried to use them, creating what amounted to paper-based booby traps that could kill from a distance. These documents might direct users to locations where natural dangers, storms, reefs, dangerous currents, or hostile wildlife made survival unlikely. They could suggest approaches to populated areas that were guaranteed to provoke violent responses from local defenders. They might recommend timing for operations that would coincide with periods of maximum danger from weather, tides, or enemy activity. Some pirates created entire false identities and fictional histories to support their decoy maps, developing elaborate backstories that made their false documents more believable and dangerous. These fictional narratives might involve invented pirate crews, imaginary treasure burials, or fabricated historical events that provided convincing contexts for the false information contained in the maps. The creation of decoy maps often involved genuine geographic and navigational knowledge that made them more convincing to potential users. Pirates might base their false maps on real locations that they had visited and studied, but alter crucial details in ways that would lead users into danger. A decoy map might show a real harbor but indicate safe approaches that were actually blocked by reefs, or depict a genuine island but suggest freshwater sources that were actually salt springs. The most psychologically sophisticated decoy maps incorporated elements of truth that made them partially useful while still being ultimately dangerous. These documents might contain accurate information about some aspects of navigation or local conditions, encouraging users to trust the maps and follow them to their ultimately false or deadly destinations. By mixing truth with lies, pirates could create false documents that were much more effective at deceiving experienced sailors than maps that were completely fabricated. Some decoy maps were designed to work over extended periods, appearing to be accurate for initial use, but containing delayed dangers that would only become apparent after users had committed significant resources to following their instructions. These maps might accurately guide users to real locations, but provide false information about seasonal conditions, political situations, or resource availability that would become dangerous only after users had traveled too far to retreat safely. The distribution of decoy maps was often as carefully planned as their creation. Pirates might deliberately allow false maps to be captured by authorities or rivals, or might sell false information to bounty hunters and treasure seekers who could be used to eliminate other threats to pirate operations. Some pirates developed reputations for selling genuine intelligence, then used that reputation to distribute false information more effectively. The psychological impact of decoy maps extended beyond their immediate effects on the people who tried to use them. The knowledge that false maps were in circulation created an atmosphere of suspicion and uncertainty that made all pirate intelligence less reliable and more dangerous to act upon. This environment of informational chaos provided additional protection for pirates. Real operations by making it harder for authorities and rivals to distinguish between genuine and false intelligence. Creating and maintaining effective decoy map operations required significant resources and coordination among pirate crews. The false documents had to be produced with sufficient quality and detail to be convincing, distributed through appropriate channels to reach intended targets, and monitored to assess their effectiveness and prevent them from accidentally harming Allied pirate operations. The success of decoy map operations depended on pirates' ability to maintain detailed intelligence about their enemies' capabilities, intentions, and vulnerabilities, creating false information that would effectively neutralize specific threats. Required understanding how those threats operated, what kinds of information they were seeking, and what mistakes they were most likely to make when presented with convincing false data. Perhaps most importantly, decoy map operations revealed the extent to which pirates understood information as a weapon that could be used both defensively and offensively in their ongoing war against civilization. These weren't simply criminal gangs trying to hide their activities, but sophisticated organizations that actively worked to manipulate the information environment in ways that protected their interests while eliminating their enemies. The intersection of real pirate operations with legendary treasure maps has created some of the most enduring mysteries in maritime history cases. where documented criminal activities intersect with persistent folklore to create puzzles that continue to fascinate researchers and treasure hunters centuries after the original events. These famous cases reveal how the reality of pirate operations became transformed into the mythology of treasure hunting, and how that mythology has in turn influenced ongoing attempts to understand historical truth. Captain William Kidd's treasure represents the most well-documented case of actual pirate treasure burial, and therefore serves as the foundation for much of the treasure map mythology that followed. Kidd's story demonstrates how extraordinary circumstances could lead even practical pirates to resort to treasure burial, and how the documentation of those activities could create lasting legends that far exceeded the historical reality. Kidd began his career as a legitimate privateer, legally authorized by British colonial authorities to attack enemy shipping during the War of the League of Augsburg. His commission was broad enough to include French ships and vessels belonging to nations allied with France, which should have provided plenty of legitimate targets for profitable operations. However, Kidd's voyage took him into the Indian Ocean, where the distinction between legitimate privateering and outright piracy became increasingly blurred. The transformation of Kidd from privateer to pirate was gradual and probably not entirely intentional. Operating far from colonial authorities who had issued his commission, Kidd found himself under pressure from his crew to attack targets that were technically outside his legal authorization. The financial backers of his expedition expected profits that were difficult to generate through strictly legal means. The practical necessities of maintaining his crew and his vessel in distant waters required resources that were hard to obtain through conventional commerce. When Kidd finally returned toward American waters, he faced accusations of piracy that threatened to destroy his life and fortune. In this desperate situation, he made the fateful decision to bury treasure on Gardiner's Island, hoping to use it as a bargaining chip in negotiations with colonial authorities. This treasure was real, substantial, and carefully documented, exactly the kind of buried pirate wealth that would later inspire countless treasure hunting expeditions. The irony of Kidd's case is that his treasure burial was motivated by desperation rather than strategic planning, and the documentation that made it famous was created by legal authorities rather than the pirate himself. When Kidd was arrested and his treasure recovered, colonial officials created detailed inventories of the buried wealth that became public records. These documents provided the factual foundation for treasure map mythology. Even though they described an exceptional case rather than typical pirate practice, the legal proceedings against Kidd generated extensive documentation that included not only inventories of his treasure, but also attempts to trace his movements and identify other possible treasure sites. Colonial authorities were convinced that Kidd had buried additional treasure in other locations, and they invested considerable resources in trying to locate these hypothetical deposits. Their investigations produced maps, witness testimonies, and official reports that read like treasure hunting guides, even though they were actually legal documents. The failure to locate additional Kidd treasure, despite extensive official searches, established a pattern that would be repeated countless times in subsequent centuries. Documented evidence of pirate wealth combined with unsuccessful attempts to recover it, creating persistent legends about treasure that remained hidden somewhere, waiting for the right person with the right information to finally claim it. Oak Island, located off the coast of Nova Scotia, represents perhaps the most famous and persistent treasure hunting mystery in North America, supposedly based on coded maps and cryptic clues that have attracted investigators for over 2 centuries. The Oak Island mystery demonstrates how pirate treasure legends can develop lives of their own, generating ongoing searches and investigations that far exceed any documented historical connection to actual pirate activities. The Oak Island story began in 1795 when teenager Daniel McGinnis discovered what appeared to be a deliberately constructed pit on the uninhabited island. The pit showed clear signs of human engineering. Layers of flagstone, oak platforms, and other materials that suggested someone had buried something valuable and taken elaborate precautions to hide and protect it. The discovery launched a treasure hunting effort that has continued intermittently for over 200 years, making Oak Island one of the longest-running treasure hunting operations in history. The connection between Oak Island and pirate treasure was not immediately apparent from the physical evidence at the site. The engineering work revealed by excavation was far more sophisticated than typical pirate operations would have required or been capable of producing. The materials and techniques used suggested organizational capabilities and resources that exceeded what most pirate crews possessed. The elaborate nature of the concealment efforts implied treasure of exceptional value and importance. Despite the lack of direct historical evidence connecting Oak Island to specific pirate activities, treasure hunters have developed elaborate theories, linking the site to various famous pirates and their supposed treasure burial activities. Some theories connect the site to Captain Kidd, despite the fact that his documented treasure burial occurred hundreds of miles away and was fully recovered by authorities. Other theories involve Blackbeard, Captain Morgan, or other famous pirates whose actual treasure burial activities are poorly documented or entirely speculative. The persistence of Oak Island treasure hunting efforts has been sustained partly by the discovery of various artifacts and clues that seem to support the treasure burial theory while never quite providing definitive proof of what was actually buried there or by whom. These discoveries have included pieces of parchment with mysterious writing, metal fragments that might be parts of treasure chests, and stones with cryptic inscriptions that some researchers believe represent coded maps or instructions. The most famous Oak Island artifact is the so-called 90-foot stone, discovered during early excavation efforts and bearing an inscription that some researchers have interpreted as a coded message indicating that massive treasure lies buried deeper in the pit. The stone itself has been lost, and surviving descriptions of its inscription vary significantly, making it impossible to verify the accuracy of proposed translations or the authenticity of the original discovery. The economic impact of Oak Island treasure hunting has been enormous, with various individuals and organizations investing millions of dollars in increasingly sophisticated excavation and exploration efforts. These investments have been justified partly by calculations suggesting that any treasure burial, elaborate enough to require the engineering work evident at Oak Island, would necessarily involve wealth of extraordinary value. The costs of concealment would only make economic sense if the concealed treasure exceeded those costs by substantial margins. Modern Oak Island investigations have employed advanced archaeological techniques, ground-penetrating radar, underwater exploration, and other sophisticated technologies that have revealed additional evidence of human activity at the site, while still failing to locate any definitive treasure. These high-tech investigations have identified complex underground structures, evidence of flood tunnels that might have been designed to protect buried treasure from excavation efforts, and other engineering features that suggest the site was indeed used for some kind of major concealment operation. The mystery of Oak Island demonstrates how pirate treasure legends can become self-sustaining cultural phenomena that generate ongoing interest and investigation regardless of their historical accuracy. The site has become famous, not because of any documented connection to pirate activities, but because of the persistent failure of treasure hunters to either find treasure or definitively prove that no treasure exists. This ongoing uncertainty has made Oak Island a permanent fixture in treasure hunting mythology. Blackbeard's treasure represents the opposite extreme from the well-documented Kidd case, a legendary treasure hoard that has become central to pirate mythology, despite the almost complete absence of historical evidence that such a treasure ever existed or was buried by the famous pirate. The Blackbeard treasure legend demonstrates how popular culture can create treasure hunting opportunities based on the reputation and charisma of individual pirates, rather than documented treasure burial activities. Edward Teach, known as Blackbeard, was undoubtedly one of the most famous and successful pirates of the Golden Age, operating primarily in the Caribbean and along the American colonial coast during the early 18th century. His success as a pirate, his distinctive appearance and psychological warfare tactics, and his dramatic death in battle with colonial authorities made him a natural subject for treasure hunting speculation. If anyone would have accumulated treasure worth burying, the reasoning goes, it would have been someone as successful and notorious as Blackbeard. However, historical evidence suggests that Blackbeard followed typical pirate practice in spending his wealth as quickly as he acquired it, rather than saving it for future use. Contemporary accounts describe him as generous with his crew, lavish in his personal spending, and constantly engaged in the expensive business of maintaining his ships and operations. Pirates who knew Blackbeard personally reported that he lived extravagantly, but showed no signs of having accumulated significant reserves of wealth. The absence of documented Blackbeard treasure has not prevented the development of elaborate theories about where such treasure might be hidden. Various locations along the American coast have been proposed as possible Blackbeard treasure sites, based on fragmentary evidence of his presence in those areas and speculation about his activities during poorly documented periods of his career. These theories often incorporate sophisticated analyses of historical records, geographic features, and local folklore to construct plausible scenarios for treasure burial activities. Some Blackbeard treasure theories involve coded maps and cryptic clues that supposedly provide directions to his hidden wealth. These maps and clues are typically based on documents of questionable authenticity, local legends that developed long after Blackbeard's death, or speculative interpretations of historical records that were never intended to provide treasure hunting guidance. The lack of contemporary documentation supporting these treasure theories has not prevented them from attracting serious investigation efforts. The psychological appeal of Blackbeard treasure hunting lies partly in the dramatic contrast between the pirate's legendary reputation and the mundane circumstances of his death. Blackbeard died in combat with colonial authorities, killed in a small-scale naval engagement that left his body riddled with sword and gunshot wounds. This violent but relatively small-scale ending seems inadequate for such a legendary figure, creating psychological space for speculation about hidden wealth that might represent a more appropriate legacy for such a famous outlaw. Modern Blackbeard treasure hunting efforts have employed many of the same sophisticated techniques used at Oak Island and other legendary treasure sites. Advanced archaeological methods, underwater exploration, metal detection surveys, and detailed analysis of historical records and geographic features. These investigations have occasionally produced interesting historical artifacts and improved understanding of Blackbeard's documented activities, but have never located anything that could be definitively identified as his buried treasure. The persistence of Blackbeard treasure hunting demonstrates how individual pirate reputations can sustain treasure hunting activities even in the absence of historical evidence supporting treasure burial theories. Blackbeard's fame as a pirate has created a kind of cultural gravitational field that attracts treasure hunting speculation, regardless of the practical evidence for or against the existence of his hidden wealth. Joseph Bannister represents a different type of treasure hunting legend, a historically documented pirate whose activities are well enough recorded to provide plausible foundations for treasure burial theories, but whose ultimate fate remains mysterious enough to sustain ongoing speculation about hidden wealth. Bannister's case demonstrates how incomplete historical records can create spaces for treasure hunting theories that are neither definitively supported nor conclusively disproven by available evidence. Bannister was a successful Caribbean pirate who operated during the late 17th century, primarily in waters around Jamaica and Hispaniola. Unlike many pirates whose careers are poorly documented, Bannister's activities were recorded in considerable detail by colonial authorities, who regarded him as a major threat to legitimate commerce and colonial security. These records provide detailed information about his ships, his crew, his successful raids, and the substantial wealth he accumulated through piracy. The documentation of Bannister's success as a pirate provides a foundation for treasure burial theories that is more solid than the speculation surrounding figures like Blackbeard. Colonial records indicate that Bannister accumulated wealth that was substantial even by the standards of successful pirates, and that he operated in areas where treasure burial would have been both practical and strategically sensible. Unlike pirates who operated primarily in heavily patrolled waters or areas with limited, secure anchorages, Bannister had access to numerous islands and coastal areas that could have provided suitable treasure burial sites. The mystery surrounding Bannister's ultimate fate adds additional appeal to treasure hunting theories about his activities. Historical records indicate that he disappeared from colonial authorities' attention during a period when most successful pirates were either captured and executed or forced to accept pardons and retire from piracy. The absence of clear documentation about Bannister's death or capture has led to speculation that he might have successfully retired from piracy with his accumulated wealth intact. Some researchers have identified Samana Bay, in what is now the Dominican Republic, as a possible location for Bannister treasure burial activities. This location was within his documented area of operations, provided the kind of secure anchorage that would have been suitable for major treasure burial operations, and remained relatively isolated from colonial authorities during the period when Bannister was active. Local folklore includes stories about mysterious treasure burial activities that some researchers believe might be folk memories of actual Bannister operations. The Bannister treasure theories have generated serious investigation efforts that have employed both historical research and physical exploration techniques. Researchers have analyzed colonial records to reconstruct Bannister's movements and identify periods when he might have had opportunities for treasure burial activities. They have studied geographic features of proposed treasure sites to assess their suitability for major concealment operations. They have investigated local folklore and oral traditions that might preserve information about historical treasure burial activities. Physical exploration efforts related to Bannister treasure theories have included underwater archaeology, metal detection surveys, and excavation of sites that match descriptions found in historical records or local traditions. These investigations have produced some interesting historical artifacts and improved understanding of colonial-era activities in the regions where Bannister operated. but have not yet located anything that could be definitively identified as his treasure. The Bannister case demonstrates how solid historical documentation can provide foundations for treasure hunting theories that are more plausible than pure speculation, while still falling short of the kind of definitive evidence that would guarantee successful treasure recovery. The combination of documented pirate success, mysterious disappearance, and plausible treasure burial opportunities creates a compelling case for treasure hunting efforts without providing certainty about their likely success. These famous treasure cases reveal the complex relationships between historical reality and treasure hunting mythology. Each case combines different proportions of documented evidence, plausible speculation, and pure fantasy to create unique treasure hunting scenarios that appeal to different types of investigators and enthusiasts. The most successful treasure hunting legends seem to require some foundation in historical reality, but they also depend on gaps in the historical record that create space for imagination and speculation. The enduring appeal of these treasure hunting cases demonstrates the power of pirate legends to capture popular imagination and sustain ongoing cultural interest in maritime history. Whether or not these legendary treasures actually exist, the searches for them have contributed significantly to historical research, archaeological investigation, and public interest in the golden age of piracy. The question of whether pirate treasure maps were real or mythological cannot be answered with a simple yes or no, because the reality of pirate cartography was far more complex and nuanced than popular culture suggests. The truth lies somewhere between complete skepticism and romantic belief, in a gray area where documented historical practices intersect with persistent folklore to create a phenomenon that is simultaneously real and imaginary. The most important distinction to understand is between treasure maps, as popularly imagined, simple documents showing the locations of buried pirate wealth, and the actual maps and coded documents that pirates created for their operational needs. Real pirate maps existed, but they served very different purposes than the treasure hunting guides of popular fiction. They were sophisticated intelligence documents, navigational aids, and communication systems that happened to be created by criminals rather than legitimate authorities or commercial organizations. Documentary evidence for actual pirate maps comes from various historical sources, including legal records from pirate trials, captured documents that were analyzed by colonial authorities, and accounts by former pirates who cooperated with law enforcement efforts. These sources confirm that pirates did create maps and use coded documentation systems, but they also reveal that such documents were rare, highly specialized, and very different from popular treasure map mythology. The rarity of authentic pirate maps reflects the practical realities of pirate life and the risks associated with creating permanent records of criminal activities. Most pirates were illiterate or barely literate, making map creation impossible for the majority of pirate crews. The materials and skills required for accurate map-making were expensive and difficult to obtain under the conditions where pirates operated. Most importantly, creating maps meant creating evidence that could be used against pirates by authorities, rivals, or mutinous crew members. When pirates did create maps, they typically did so only under extraordinary circumstances that made the benefits worth the risks. These circumstances might include complex operations that required coordination among multiple crews long-term, strategic planning that extended beyond immediate tactical needs or situations, where valuable intelligence needed to be preserved and transmitted across time and distance in ways that could not be accomplished through oral communication alone. The maps that pirates created under these circumstances were sophisticated documents that incorporated multiple layers of information and protection. They combined legitimate navigational data with coded intelligence, misleading information designed to confuse unauthorized users, and security features that helped identify authentic documents and detect forgeries. These were not simple treasure hunting guides, but complex information systems that reflected the intelligence requirements of international criminal organizations. The transformation of these real but rare pirate maps into the treasure map mythology of popular culture occurred through a process that combined legitimate historical interest with commercial publishing opportunities and public fascination with adventure stories. The process began in the 19th century, when increased interest in pirate history coincided with the development of mass-market publishing and popular fiction writing. Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, published in 1883, played a crucial role in establishing treasure map mythology in popular culture. Stevenson's fictional map, with its iconic X marks the spot designation and romantic implications of buried pirate wealth, became the template for countless subsequent treasure map stories in literature, film, and other media. The success of Stevenson's novel demonstrated the commercial appeal of treasure hunting stories and encouraged other writers to develop similar themes. The influence of Treasure Island was so profound that it essentially created the popular conception of what pirate treasure maps should look like and how they should function. Stevenson's fictional innovations. The simple X marking the straightforward relationship between map and buried treasure, the idea that treasure maps were commonly created and used by pirates, became accepted as historical facts by readers, who did undistinguish between fiction and historical documentation. This fictional foundation was reinforced by commercial interests that found treasure hunting stories profitable and marketable. Publishers, filmmakers, and other media producers discovered that audiences had an apparently insatiable appetite for treasure hunting adventures, leading to the production of countless books, movies, and other entertainment products that further established treasure map mythology in popular culture. The commercial success of treasure map entertainment created economic incentives for people to claim discovery of authentic pirate maps and to organize treasure hunting expeditions based on allegedly genuine historical documents. These commercial treasure hunting operations often involved sophisticated marketing campaigns that blurred the boundaries between historical research and entertainment, creating public confusion about the actual historical evidence for pirate treasure burial activities. Some commercial treasure hunting operations involved genuine historical research that produced valuable insights into pirate history and maritime archaeology. Even when they failed to locate actual treasure, these efforts contributed to academic understanding of pirate operations, colonial maritime activities, and the historical development of navigation and cartography. The most serious treasure hunting efforts employed legitimate archaeological methods and contributed to scientific knowledge regardless of their success in locating treasure. However, many commercial treasure hunting operations were essentially fraudulent schemes that exploited public fascination with pirate legends to raise money from investors, who were promised shares in hypothetical treasure discoveries. These fraudulent operations typically involved fake maps, fabricated historical evidence, and elaborate stories that combined enough genuine historical detail to seem plausible, while making claims that were completely unsupported by actual evidence. The persistence of fraudulent treasure hunting schemes has contributed to public skepticism about pirate treasure legends, while paradoxically reinforcing the mythological aspects of treasure map culture. Each exposed fraud confirms that most treasure map claims are false. but also reinforces the idea that genuine treasure maps might exist somewhere, waiting to be discovered by more careful and legitimate researchers. Academic historians and archaeologists have generally approached pirate treasure legends with appropriate skepticism, focusing on documented historical evidence rather than speculative treasure hunting claims. Their research has revealed the limited extent of actual pirate treasure burial activities, while also documenting the sophisticated information systems that pirates did use for their operational needs. This academic research has created a more nuanced understanding of pirate cartography that acknowledges both the reality of pirate map-making and the mythology that has developed around it. Pirates did create maps and use coded documentation, but these documents served operational rather than treasure hunting purposes. The maps existed, but they were not the simple treasure hunting guides that popular culture imagines them to be. The intersection of academic research with popular treasure hunting culture has created ongoing debates about the interpretation of historical evidence and the evaluation of treasure hunting claims. Academic researchers emphasize the importance of verifiable documentation, archaeological context, and peer review in evaluating historical claims. Treasure hunting enthusiasts often argue that academic caution prevents recognition of genuine discoveries and that important historical evidence is being dismissed because it does unfit established scholarly paradigms. These debates reflect broader cultural tensions about the relationship between professional expertise and popular enthusiasm, between scientific method and adventure seeking, between historical accuracy and entertainment value. The debates are unlikely to be resolved definitively because they involve fundamental differences in values, methods, and objectives that reflect different approaches to understanding the past and its relationship to present-day interests. The ultimate answer to whether pirate treasure maps were real or mythological is that they were both, depending on how the question is understood and what kind of evidence is considered relevant. Real pirates created real maps for real operational purposes, but these documents were very different from the treasure maps of popular imagination. The treasure map mythology is based on genuine historical activities, but it has been transformed and distorted by commercial and entertainment interests to the point where it bears little resemblance to historical reality. This complex relationship between reality and mythology is perhaps more interesting and revealing than either complete belief or complete skepticism would be. It demonstrates how historical events can be transformed by cultural processes into legends that serve different purposes than the original events, while still maintaining enough connection to historical reality to seem plausible and compelling to contemporary audiences. The influence of pirate treasure map mythology on modern popular culture has been profound and pervasive, extending far beyond the maritime adventure stories where it originated to become a fundamental element of contemporary entertainment, gaming, tourism, and even business culture. The symbols, concepts, and narrative structures that emerged from pirate cartography legends have become part of the basic vocabulary of adventure and mystery in ways that most people take for granted without recognizing their historical origins. Film and television have been the primary vehicles for spreading and reinforcing treasure map mythology in modern culture. From early Hollywood adventure films to contemporary blockbuster franchises, the image of the mysterious map leading to buried treasure has become one of the most recognizable and reliable plot devices in popular entertainment. The visual language of treasure maps, aged parchment, cryptic symbols, mysterious markings, and the iconic X has become so standardized that audiences immediately understand the narrative implications when these elements appear on screen. The Pirates of the Caribbean film franchise represents, perhaps, the most successful modern adaptation of pirate treasure map mythology, combining traditional treasure hunting elements with contemporary special effects and marketing strategies to create a global entertainment phenomenon. These films drew heavily on classic treasure map imagery, while updating the concept for modern audiences, creating treasure hunting scenarios that were simultaneously familiar and innovative. The success of pirate-themed entertainment has created a feedback loop that reinforces public interest in treasure hunting and pirate history, while also distorting public understanding of historical reality. Modern audiences often base their expectations about pirate treasure maps on entertainment media rather than historical documentation, creating situations where fiction becomes more influential than fact in shaping contemporary cultural understanding. Gaming culture has embraced treasure map concepts with particular enthusiasm, incorporating treasure hunting mechanics into everything from simple children's games to sophisticated video game adventures and elaborate alternate reality experiences. The structure of treasure hunting, following clues, solving puzzles, overcoming obstacles, and discovering hidden rewards, translates naturally into gaming formats that provide players with clear objectives, measurable progress, and satisfying achievements. Video games have been particularly influential in spreading treasure map concepts to younger generations, who might not encounter these ideas through traditional literature or film. Games ranging from simple puzzle adventures to complex, massively multiplayer online environments have incorporated treasure hunting elements that familiarize players with the symbols, concepts, and narrative structures associated with pirate cartography. The gamification of treasure hunting has also influenced real-world activities, with the development of treasure hunting games, geocaching, escape rooms, and other experiences that bring digital gaming concepts into physical environments. These activities often incorporate authentic historical elements while adapting them for contemporary entertainment purposes, creating hybrid experiences that combine education with adventure. Tourism industries have recognized the commercial potential of pirate treasure map mythology, developing attractions, tours, and experiences that capitalize on public fascination with treasure hunting adventures. Pirate-themed tourism has become a significant economic force in many coastal regions, particularly in areas with legitimate historical connections to pirate activities. Caribbean tourism has been particularly successful in exploiting pirate treasure map mythology, with numerous destinations offering pirate-themed attractions that combine historical education with adventure entertainment. These attractions often include replica treasure maps, staged treasure hunts, and immersive experiences that allow tourists to participate in simulated pirate adventures while learning about actual pirate history. The success of pirate tourism has created economic incentives for communities to emphasize their historical connections to piracy, while sometimes exaggerating or fabricating those connections to meet tourist expectations. This commercialization of pirate history has contributed to the ongoing blurring of boundaries between historical fact and entertaining fiction in popular understanding of pirate culture. Corporate culture has adopted treasure map imagery and concepts as metaphors for business strategy, problem-solving, and achievement. The idea of following a map to discover hidden treasure has become a popular framework for describing business processes, with companies using treasure hunting metaphors to describe everything from market research to product development to strategic planning. The appeal of treasure map metaphors in business culture reflects their effectiveness in communicating complex concepts about goal setting, problem solving, and reward achievement in ways that are immediately understandable and emotionally engaging. The treasure hunting framework provides a narrative structure that makes abstract business processes more concrete and memorable. Educational applications have also embraced treasure map concepts as tools for making learning more engaging and interactive. Teachers use treasure hunting activities to teach everything from basic geography and history to advanced problem solving and critical thinking skills. The treasure map framework provides a game-like structure that motivates student participation while teaching substantive content. These educational applications often incorporate genuine historical content about pirates and maritime history, creating opportunities for students to learn about real historical events while participating in engaging activities based on treasure map mythology. The combination of entertainment and education has proven particularly effective in engaging students who might not otherwise be interested in historical topics. The psychological appeal of treasure map concepts reflects fundamental human interests in exploration, discovery, problem solving, and the possibility of finding hidden value in unexpected places. Treasure maps represent a form of hope that suggests valuable things are waiting to be discovered by people who have the knowledge, persistence, and courage to seek them out. This psychological appeal has made treasure map concepts useful in therapeutic and personal development contexts, where the metaphor of following a map to discover hidden treasure can represent personal growth, self-discovery, and the achievement of life goals. The treasure hunting framework provides a way of conceptualizing personal challenges and achievements that emphasizes agency, effort, and the possibility of meaningful rewards. The persistence and adaptability of treasure map concepts in modern culture demonstrate their effectiveness as symbolic systems that can be adapted to serve multiple purposes, while maintaining their essential appeal. Whether used for entertainment, education, business, or personal development, treasure map concepts provide frameworks for understanding and organizing human experiences that resonate across different contexts and cultures. However, the widespread adoption of treasure map mythology has also contributed to the ongoing confusion between historical reality and popular fiction that makes it difficult for contemporaries to understand the actual history of piracy and maritime criminal activity. The success of treasure map concepts as entertainment and metaphor has made them so familiar and appealing that they often overshadow the more complex and less romantic realities of historical pirate operations. This tension between entertainment value and historical accuracy represents an ongoing challenge for educators, historians, and cultural institutions that want to capitalize on public interest in pirate culture, while also providing accurate information about historical reality. The popularity of treasure map mythology creates opportunities to engage public interest in maritime history, but it also creates obligations to distinguish between fictional entertainment and historical documentation. The future development of treasure map culture will likely continue to reflect this tension between historical accuracy and entertainment value, with different applications emphasizing different aspects of the treasure map legacy. Entertainment media will probably continue to develop new variations on classic treasure hunting themes, while educational and cultural institutions will work to provide more historically accurate information about the realities of pirate operations and maritime crime. The enduring appeal of treasure map concepts suggests that they will continue to evolve and adapt to serve contemporary cultural needs, regardless of their historical accuracy. The fundamental human interests that treasure maps represent, exploration, discovery, problem solving, and the hope of finding hidden value, are unlikely to become less relevant to human experience, ensuring that some version of treasure map culture will persist even as specific applications and interpretations continue to change. In examining the full spectrum of pirate treasure map culture, From its historical origins to its contemporary applications, we discover a phenomenon that reveals as much about human nature and cultural processes as it does about pirate history. The transformation of limited historical pirate cartographic practices into elaborate treasure-hunting mythology demonstrates how cultures create and maintain legends that serve psychological and social needs that extend far beyond their original historical contexts. The story of pirate treasure maps ultimately teaches us that the relationship between historical reality and cultural mythology is complex, dynamic, and more interesting than either complete factual accuracy or pure fiction would be alone. Real pirates did create real maps that served real operational purposes. But those maps were transformed by cultural processes into something very different, that serves different purposes for contemporary society. The maps that pirates carried were never just navigation aids or treasure hunting guides. They were survival documents, created by people who lived entirely outside the protection of law and civilization, who had to create their own systems for preserving and transmitting the information they needed to stay alive and maintain their criminal enterprises. These maps represented the ingenuity, desperation, and sophisticated intelligence of people who had chosen to live at the absolute edges of human experience. The codes and symbols that pirates embedded in their maps were not mere decorative elements or simple puzzles designed for entertainment. They were life and death information systems that had to function under conditions where error meant capture, torture, and execution. The people who created these codes understood that information was often more valuable than gold, and that the ability to hide and protect information was essential for survival in their dangerous world. The sophistication of pirate coding systems challenges popular stereotypes about pirates as simple criminals motivated only by greed and violence. The maps reveal people who were capable of complex strategic thinking, sophisticated organizational planning, and innovative problem-solving under extreme pressure. These were not mindless thugs, but intelligent individuals who developed creative solutions to the unique challenges of their chosen way of life. The religious and spiritual elements in pirate maps remind us that even people who lived outside conventional moral boundaries maintained complex relationships with questions of meaning, purpose, and transcendence. Pirates might have rejected the authority of churches and governments, but many of them continued to seek spiritual guidance and protection in their own terms. Their maps reveal people who were trying to make sense of their place in the universe, while living lives that most of their contemporaries would have considered damned. The practical intelligence revealed in pirate cartography demonstrates the remarkable adaptability of human beings. When faced with extreme circumstances, pirates created sophisticated information systems using limited resources under dangerous conditions, developing techniques that were often more innovative and effective than the methods used by legitimate authorities. Their success in creating and using complex coded information systems proves that humans can develop remarkable capabilities when their survival depends on it. The transformation of these real pirate practices into treasure map mythology reveals how cultures process and interpret historical events to serve contemporary needs. The pirates who created coded maps were trying to survive in a specific historical context. But the legends that grew up around their activities serve very different purposes for modern audiences. The mythology provides frameworks for thinking about adventure, risk, reward, and the possibility of discovering hidden value that remain relevant, even though the original historical context has long since disappeared. The persistence of treasure map culture across different media, applications, and generations demonstrates the power of symbols and narratives that connect with fundamental human experiences and desires. The treasure map represents hopes and fears that transcend any specific historical period. The hope that effort and intelligence can lead to valuable discoveries. The fear that important information might be lost or misunderstood. The desire to leave permanent records of significant experiences, and the belief that patient investigation can reveal secrets that are invisible to casual observation. For pirates, treasure was never just gold and silver, though they certainly pursued material wealth with dedication and courage that few people could match. The real treasure that pirates sought was freedom. Freedom from the social hierarchies that restricted their opportunities. Freedom from the legal systems that criminalized their survival strategies. Freedom from the economic arrangements that kept them in poverty, and freedom from the cultural expectations that demanded they accept lives of quiet desperation. The maps they created were records of that freedom. Documentation of lives lived entirely on their own terms, regardless of the cost. Every coded symbol, every hidden meaning, every sophisticated encryption system was evidence that these people had refused to accept the limitations that society tried to impose on them. They had chosen to write their own rules, create their own systems, and take responsibility for their own survival. The real treasure was knowledge. Knowledge of navigation and seamanship, knowledge of human psychology and group dynamics, knowledge of politics and economics, knowledge of codes and symbols, and most importantly, knowledge of themselves and their capabilities when faced with extreme challenges. This knowledge was hidden in symbols that only the chosen could read, because it was knowledge that could only be earned through experience, courage, and commitment to a way of life that most people would never dare to attempt. Modern treasure hunters who continue to search for pirate gold are really searching for something more precious and more elusive than material wealth. They are seeking connection to that spirit of absolute freedom and unlimited possibility that pirates represented, the promise that somewhere in the world there are still secrets waiting to be discovered by people who have the courage and persistence to seek them out. The codes remain unbroken, not because they are impossible to solve, but because the real treasure they protected was never buried in the ground. It was buried in the hearts and minds of people who understood that true wealth comes from the knowledge that you are capable of creating your own destiny, regardless of what the world tries to tell you is possible or impossible. The legends refuse to die because they represent something that every generation needs to rediscover. The knowledge that life is an adventure that rewards those who are brave enough to create their own maps, write their own codes, and follow their own compass toward destinations that exist only in their imagination, until they find the courage to make them real. If you've been captivated by the hidden world of pirate codes and secret maps, prepare yourself for stories that are even more mysterious and haunting. Join us next time as we explore the legend of pirate ghost ships, vessels that refuse to sink into history, captains who won't stay dead, and maritime mysteries that continue to terrify sailors centuries after their origins. These aren't just stories of supernatural terror, but tales of how pirate legends achieve their own form of immortality on the endless seas where they once ruled through fear and cunning.